In this video, we'll be covering a brief overview on hormones and the concept of homeostasis, which is key to appreciating the mechanisms and goals of these chemical messengers. I would recommend watching this introduction through before going deeper into what you need to know about hormones for your IB exams. A link to that mind map can be found in the description below. So let's begin. We start off with homeostasis. What is it? Homeostasis is defined as the maintenance of a constant internal environment, referring to within the human body. Think of your entire system as a seesaw of sorts, where there is a constant balancing act occurring to ensure that your body remains in a stable state. This is important because if the internal conditions of the body deviate too far from the norm, it leads to dysfunction. Some examples of homeostatic balance can be seen in the maintenance of temperature, pH, as well as water potential within certain ranges. The process of homeostasis, which can be referred to as homeostatic control, can be simply illustrated in this flowchart. The body begins as normal until a stimulus threatens the internal conditions to deviate from the norm. For example, an increase in body temperature. Receptors within the body detect this change, triggering a corrective mechanism to ensure that the normal body temperature is maintained or to bring the condition back to normal. Continuing the example, this will mean decreasing the body's temperature. This occurs automatically and involuntarily. An important thing to note at this point is the concept of negative feedback. As homeostasis occurs to bring the body back to a normal state, a feedback signal is sent down to regulate the corrective mechanism to ensure that there isn't an overcompensation to the other extreme, decreasing the body temperature so much that body temperature now becomes lower than normal. This idea of feedback is one of the key pillars to understanding hormones and their actions. Now, let's look at a real-life example of homeostasis in play. Going to my just introduced example of body temperature deviating from the norm, there are two scenarios that can play out. When body temperature rises above that of normal ranges when the surroundings get too hot, and when it drops below when it gets too cold. This stimulus is picked up by thermoreceptors in the skin that send nerve impulses to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus in turn initiates a corrective mechanism by means of sending nerve impulses to the skin. There are other homeostatic mechanisms to regulate body temperature, but in this example, we will be just looking at the role skin plays. When it is too hot, a couple of things happen. Number one, nerve impulses trigger sweat glands to produce more sweat, which is secreted onto the surface of the epidermis. The evaporation of water in sweat then removes latent heat from the body. Number two, hair erector muscles relax, allowing for greater loss of heat to the surrounding environment. And lastly, vasodilation occurs, where arterioles dilate while shunt vessels constrict. This causes an increase in blood flow to the capillaries closer to the skin surface, allowing for greater heat loss to the surroundings. The dilation also decreases blood pressure and hence flow, allowing for a more effective transfer of heat from the blood to the environment. When it is too cold, the opposite basically happens. Less sweat is produced and hair erector muscles contract, causing the hairs on the skin to stand up. This has the effect of creating an insulating air buffer between your skin and the surrounding environment, which reduces heat loss to the environment. Reflex shivering occurs as well to create movement, and vasoconstriction occurs where arterioles constrict and shunt vessels dilate. This has the effect of reducing blood flow to capillaries near the surface of the skin, as blood simply flows via shunt vessels instead of the smaller capillaries. A detailed diagram of these different skin components can be seen on the left here, where we begin with the thermoreceptors detecting the change in temperature, which sends the signal to the hypothalamus. In turn, it triggers changes at sweat glands, hair erector muscles, as well as blood vessels to achieve homeostasis, in this case to regulate body temperature. Now, let's move on to hormones. What are they? There are 3 points that you have to know about hormones. Firstly, they are chemical substances produced in minute quantities by an endocrine gland. Endocrine glands are to be differentiated from exocrine glands, which in contrast are glands that secrete substances via ducts onto a body surface. An example of this will be sweat glands. Endocrine glands, on the other hand, secrete hormones directly into blood. where it gets transported via the bloodstream to its target organ before exerting its effect. This is the second point. Lastly, when hormones are not in use, they get broken down to stop its effect. This occurs in the liver. There are many endocrine glands in the body. However, the key ones that you need to know are as stated. The two most important endocrine glands are the hypothalamus, which is located in the brain, and the pituitary gland, which is in close proximity. I often think of the hypothalamus as the king gland, as it is where nerve impulses are sent to before going on to signal the secretion of other hormones. This signaling is in the form of hormones themselves, the key one being the neurohormones that control pituitary hormone secretion. The pituitary gland, in turn, is often referred to as the master gland, because it then goes on to secrete hormones controlling the secretion of other hormones. Therefore, the hypothalamus controls the pituitary gland, which goes on to control many other glands, including the adrenal gland, the thyroid gland, the ovaries, as well as the testes. Once stimulated, these glands go on to secrete hormones of their own to exert specific effects. Some examples of hormones are listed here. Just a brief recognition of these hormones will suffice. However, one important hormone to take note of is adrenaline, in terms of both its mode of secretion as well as the effects that it has on the body. Adrenaline is secreted by adrenal glands in fight or flight situations, where it enters the bloodstream to carry out its effect on target organs. The effects of adrenaline are varied and include, but is not limited to, the following. Adrenaline can influence blood glucose levels and metabolism. It also increases your heart rate and ventilation. Other effects include effects on blood vessels, your pupils, as well as your muscles. The effects of adrenaline predominantly revolve around priming the body for a response. One common short answer or essay question that comes out is detailing the differences between endocrine control to induce a response and nervous control. The specific differences between the two can be seen on the left here. Endocrine control involves hormones transported in the blood, while nervous control operates using nerve impulses transmitted by neurons. Due to the nature of transport, endocrine control is often slow, while nervous control is much quicker. Endocrine system can enact both short and long-term effects that target multiple organs, while nervous system's effects are often short-lived and localized. Lastly, endocrine control is completely involuntary, as the body detects stimuli, while nervous control can be either voluntary or involuntary. This brings me to the end of my overview video on hormones and homeostasis. I will be doing another video on hormones detailing the specific features that you are required to know for your IB examinations. Do check that video out. Anyways, I hope this video has been useful to you. Have a good day.